Good morning. It is Wednesday, February 23rd. It's 8:33 a.m. and this is a meeting of the Senate Natural Resources and Energy Committee. We are taking up this morning, first off, S-148, an act relating to environmental justice in Vermont, which is a bill that I hope to see us voting that out tomorrow. But meanwhile, we're continuing a tour with different operating areas that will be impacted by the bill. And this morning we're visiting with PUC. So good morning, Mr. Nauer and Mr. Faber. Thanks for joining us. I don't know if you've, so just to make sure you know what we're up to, we've been talking with different operating areas since S-148 really envisions a widespread propagation of environmental justice work throughout all the agencies of state government, including you folks. And so we've been learning a little bit from guests coming in about what they're doing already. And as they look at the bill as it currently exists, how might that impact them? And then the last thing is the Joint Fiscal Office has been reaching out to each operating area, asking them what if it has any fiscal impact on your operating area. So that's what we're up to. And good morning. We'd love to hear what your thoughts are.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, I'm Greg Faber, and with me is Tom Nauer, Director of Policy at the PUC. In general, we support the goals of the bill. I would like to ask, as a sort of preliminary question, which version are you folks working off of these days? Is it 2.1? Is it 3.2? You seem to be going back and forth, and I'm not exactly sure where you are.
3.2 is, there'll be another version tomorrow, but in essence, the nuts and bolts of 3.2 are quite close to, I think, what will be passed.
Okay.
So you would end up with a role, for instance, participating in the interagency environmental justice committee, so there would also be an impact in terms of a public outreach, public engagement process, which you may well already have, but could be influenced by the provisions in the bill. So.
Right. Yeah. Well, we've looked at both versions, so and our comments are the same for both. Basically, we've been doing a lot of this stuff already. For instance, we're working on a community engagement plan. So a lot of this stuff fits with what we're doing. We do have a problem with, well, I guess it's page 11 of 3.2, subsection F1.
Okay.
And this has to do with the investments by agencies and departments. Everybody has to invest 55% in various environmental justice areas as described in the bill. The PUC does not make any investments. Our budget is solely for our operating expenses. But this would require us to issue reports on investments that we don't make. So you may want to take us out of this section. And again, it's subsection F1, where it says all agencies, departments listed in subsection B. Subsection B pulls us into that. So that's something you may want to consider. I'm not sure all the other agencies make those types of investments either. I'm thinking of the Natural Resources Board, but you may want to speak to them. I can't really speak to them myself, but I'm just thinking maybe they operate the same way we do, which is our budget covers our operating expenses. So we're not making any of these investments. In version 2.1, it was clear that it was really referring to A&R, Department of Public Safety and Department of Public Service. Those agencies do make investments, and that's totally appropriate. But now you've pulled in, maybe by mistake, all these other agencies which may or may not make investments. So that's something to think about.
Yeah, thank you. So as I've been listening, I haven't been able to flip I didn't catch exactly where you were. So I want to make sure.
Well, I'm on page 11, Senator Bray.
Okay.
And if you look at subsection F1 on that page, it's the second, it's on beginning on line 5 on page 11. It says agencies and departments listed listed in subsection B. And if you go back to subsection B on the previous page, it pulls in everybody. It pulls in us. So we would like not to be pulled in because we don't make the investments. Obviously, we can't do these reports that you're requiring us to do.
Yeah, that's kind of a difficult position to be in.
It's, I think it's an oversight, and you may want to look at the other agencies that are pulled in as well. They may be in the same boat. I just don't know for sure.
Okay, thank you for pointing that out. We'll keep scrubbing a little more on the bill.
And that's pretty much it. I mean, there is a section where we're included in the interagency committee, and it requires the entire interagency committee to look at environmental justice complaints and make recommendations on those. Obviously, if there was a complaint that involved a case that might be coming before us or that was before us, obviously we wouldn't be able to participate in that portion of that
Sure.
process. So
Sure.
just to alert you to that too,
Okay.
we would have to recuse ourselves from that. So
Yeah.
other than that, we support the bill, and we're happy to answer. Between Tom and myself, hopefully we can answer any questions you might have.
Okay, right. Yeah, that sort of role I could imagine you playing in that interagency group. You might be aware of. Well, one of the areas where we have conversations and some conflict is oversighting decisions. So I can imagine that that might be a place where people would particularly welcome your participation. You know, like how is it that who's brought into the process at what stage in order to make sure that people in an area affected by a project have an opportunity to speak, whatever, which I know it's already part of the outreach that the PUC does. But, you know, and for some areas, I think this means substantive change. For other areas, it's already part of their sort of business as usual. Subject to some revisions or expansions, et cetera. But okay, no, that was it. That's really it. You know, we just want to make sure that there wasn't an unintended impact like the one you pointed out. And excuse me. Other than that, it's really just a check-in to make sure that we are aware of how it works for your agency. Have you heard from the Joint Fiscal Office to date?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we're included in that fiscal note. We basically said it wouldn't have any major impact on us. It's hard for us to tell. I mean, if it does require us amending a lot of our rules and policies, obviously that's a lot of work for us, but it's hard to quantify in terms of actual employees and hours. But it could be a great deal of work for us, as it will be for most of the other agencies.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. That's, I think, unless there are any, so I'm looking to members of the committee. I don't know if anyone else in the committee has any questions for our colleagues at the PUC. All right. If not, it's just like going to the dentist and having him tell you that you have no cavities. Look, you're just in and out of the chair in a moment. No pain. Okay. Thanks for coming in, and we'll move forward on the agenda. So that was, we're a little ahead, and I'm hoping that I can't always see everyone who's here. Do we have any of our next round of guests that weren't actually scheduled to start till 9? Jude here yet?
No,
Okay.
Nobody's here.
All right, well, perfect. So I've been thinking overnight about a couple things I want to check in with the committee on. One is our Act 250 bill, and the other is we have 3 fish and wildlife bills, and we have half a week right now, and then we have the week we're back. So let me take them in that order. So fish and wildlife bills, have committee members given some thought to prioritizing them, and how we might, the timing of taking up and moving bills. I don't know if people have a preference, like what they would like to see first. I'll offer up a thought. I think one of the simplest ones is the coyote hunting, hound hunting bill. And I thought we might take some testimony on that and get going that first, and take more testimony on the other bills when we get back. But what I would love to see us do is be able to move all three, take enough testimony and move all three by crossover. Some of these things are issues that have been festering for years. And, I think while it's our turn, we should try to help out everyone and not let these things just slide forward yet another biennium. So any committee thoughts about trying to move all three? Senator Campion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excuse me. That sounds good to me. That sounds like a good plan. And starting with coyote seems to make sense. Thanks.
All right. So back to Act 250. So I'll schedule testimony on the coyote bill, and I'll schedule testimony on the other two bills for the week we're back. And I think none of these issues are entirely new. So we can take more testimony to come up to speed again and be ready to move bills. So on Act 250, two things. One is based on the testimony we heard yesterday. I'm trying to find a proposal to come back to our committee with that says I think the housing world that we heard from yesterday, namely VHCB and VHFA, there are others, of course, we know, but the idea of an entirely new construct, ARPA-funded districts, is kind of unwelcome additional complexity at a time where they're working hard to figure out and how to spend the money they have. We've been dissatisfied, though, by the terms of the deal in traditional priority housing projects, and I think with good reason. So I think what I would like to have us consider, and I'll ask Ellen to draft something so we can look at it as a point of discussion, is to stick with PHPs, but to add a proviso that if the primary funding source for your PHP is ARPA money, that there would be a higher level of performance, in terms of their affordability. So it's the same construct, but I know that we learned there are often 5, 6, 7 different streams of money. But so rather than create a whole new variety, we could just simply say if ARPA money are the primary dollars, then we would expect more out of that project. So I don't know if we're trying to thread the needle here. I don't know if that sounds like a workable idea. If anyone has some thoughts in response to that. Senator McDonald.
How could we have an overarching recommendation that stuff spent with ARPA or designated housing monies meet a minimum standard of construction for low, moderate, and missing middle?
Right.
Just as that is expected, as that's the purpose of those monies, is to serve those populations, not simply build more dwellings for the upper income, where of course the money is.
Right. So I think we still have more to learn in order to know how to find an equation that works, that satisfies our desire to see more affordable housing for more people for longer, and would still get developers to participate. So we're definitely into a housing discussion, and the real connection for us is that we're offering an exemption from Act 250 for those who would work in this way, take on a project like that. Senator McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I've been here, the black screen notwithstanding, one of the advantages of Zoom. Yeah, once again, I want to put on that I am not happy with the exemption at all. And I believe there are other ways.
Sure.
Just leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. And all right, so I'm going to pursue that with Ellen. There's two other pieces to sort of fitting this puzzle together. One is there's been a discussion between, I've talked with Senator Sirotkin and the Pro Tem about, would our bill be referred to economic development for incorporation into their omnibus housing bill? No decision has been made one way or the other, as I know. I'm meeting with them again this afternoon, late afternoon. So nothing's been set up yet, but so there's that, I think, will influence what we do a little bit. So I'll keep working outside of committee time and bring yet another version back to the committee, and we'll see what we think as a group. The other thing I wanted to check in on was, Senator McCormick, you mentioned an amendment, and I don't know if you mean to 234 or an amendment to the floor or what you're referring to.
Ellen is working on an amendment for me right now, and it's basically taking the bill that's already before our committee and inserting it into this bill in lieu of the exemption language.
Okay, so you're saying, in essence, it's an amendment for the new section we just went through yesterday, for instance, to substitute for that section or those sections.
Yeah, to substitute the umbrella permit approach for the exemption.
Okay. All right. And I think has she already drafted this? I'm just thinking about logistics a little bit.
I have not seen it yet. She has not gotten it to me yet.
Okay. All right. So we'll take a look when you have an amendment in hand. And please let me know when you have that, so we'd have to schedule her in to do some version of a walkthrough, as well as provide time in the schedule for you to lead the discussion, make the pitch. Okay.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yep, thank you. All right, so we're still a little ahead. Any other committee business that people can think of? So 234 will have at least another version to look at in the next, by the end of the week. 148, we should have a clean copy ready to vote. I'm going to check back in with ANR on that last edit that said all agencies, which it had not said before, and see about the implications. As Mr. Faber pointed out, it may not be that all the agencies make quote-unquote investments, so it wouldn't be appropriate to list them. So we'll straighten out that small hiccup and have a votable version tomorrow to go through. I'll schedule in some testimony on the Fish and Wildlife bill. And then today, the balance of this morning from 9 through noon is on weatherization. So my hope is that the funding piece, I think, is pretty well in place. We know what's proposed. Our Senate colleagues have agreed. I have a meeting with Senator Westman and Chair Kitchell on approach to just discuss that further. And now we need, some proposals. I feel like we've put out a request for proposals, an RFP to operating areas and others, and saying, if you have a concrete proposal that addresses workforce, that is actionable, and we can fund it, please share it with us, because we'd like to know more and be able to address it. So I'm hoping that we, by the end of this morning, we will have more than one or more proposals that fit those criteria. All right, so if people want, Senator McCormick, I don't know if you're back to offer comments or just back. Okay. All right. Senator McDonald's giving you the universal, we can't hear you sign.
I said I turned the screen off as a courtesy to the committee, Mr. Chair.
Oh, okay. Well, say no more. All right. So we're scheduled to have our guests in at 9. That's 6 minutes away. If people want to take a minute or two to do something, grab a coffee, stretch, fine. And we'll pick up on weatherization at 9 o'clock. Meanwhile, Jude, I'm going to send you an email in the next 2 minutes related to schedule.
Okay. Committee's on a short break until 9 o'clock. Senator McDonald, we are still live because it was such a short break. So you might want to shut your screen off.
Jude,
Yes.
My apologies. I had to step away for a call. I see we're still live, but it looks like we're on a break.
Yeah, but we're only on a 2 or 3 minute break, so we
Okay.
don't, yeah.
All right. Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Yeah.
Hey, Brian. You still there?
Yeah, I am.
All right. So did you guys take that NAGA testimony with a grain of salt, I hope?
Well, we're still live, just so you know, and we're on YouTube, but I'm happy to talk about it.
Okay.
Yep. No, we only heard from one person who did a decent job.
All right. We'll talk to you later.
Good morning, Representative Stebbins. We are just on a short pause, so we should begin any moment.
Matter of fact, we're back to 9 o'clock, so we're on schedule.
Great. And morning, Chair Bray. I hope it's okay if we change the order of the speakers a little bit.
Absolutely. I always figure when we invite in a bunch of people, particularly those who have worked together, we want to hear you in the order that makes most sense to you, since you know more about what you're up to than we do. So are you going to be first witness, though?
Dylan will.
Dylan, okay. So I'll call on Dylan first. All right. Thank you for that. All right.
And if you'd like the order, it'll be Dylan, me, David Justice, Andrew on behalf of Resource, and then Dwight, and then Paul. Thank you.
Thank you. So Andrew's with Resource.
Yes.
Okay. And Thomas Longstreth is not here.
No, he's unable to make it. So hence Andrew is speaking on his behalf, and Ronnie also cannot make it.
Okay. Thank you very much. It's live theater.
Indeed.
Yeah. Okay. So committee, it's 9 o'clock and we have a quorum and our guests have arrived in the meanwhile. So with that, we're turning to S-284, an act relating to weatherization, to hear from folks about workforce. One of the, and just for people who are joining this part of the discussion now, so we had identified last year, there's been work on it. There was a work group over the summer. There's more than one work group actually. And the two major ingredients we need to help weatherization succeed are a workforce that has two different sides to it. One is we've been calling it kitchen table counseling. So energy and financial coaching that helps people manage their finances better, including controlling energy costs to address energy burdens. And then there's the workforce component that it includes the technicians out in the field doing the actual practices. The third leg of the stool there is funding. And we're in the fortunate position of the governor's proposal, which we're supporting and talking with appropriations about, is 4 years of funding at an additional $20 million of support. So that really lets us help invest at a much higher level than we have in the years past. So with that, I'd love to start with a former colleague, now, well, still a colleague, but in a new form. Mr. Giambattista, good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Great. Well, thank you for having me here. And for the record, Dylan Giambattista, the leader of public affairs for VGS. VGS, otherwise known as Vermont Gas Systems, is up in the northwest corner of the state, provides energy to 55,000 homes and businesses in Addison, Chittenden, and Franklin counties. But I am here today to speak to you as the co-chair of a network action team with Energy Action Network. And that is the team focused on climate workforce currently. So today you're going to hear from some folks who participate in our climate workforce group who have different expertise spanning different areas, including workforce development, some education, and also low-income weatherization, all of which we hope will be useful to you as you begin this process. But I do want to just share a couple slides with you here to give you an overview of what this whole network action team is. But before I do that, I want to say, for those of you who may or may not have worked with Energy Action Network, EAN, they are a nonprofit, and they do not lobby for any particular legislation or funding. However, members of their coalition of network teams and so forth do occasionally have opinions. And so we're very happy to share those with you today. So I'm just going to share my screen if I can figure this out. Bear with me. Hopefully you can see it here.
Right. Well, and while we're making this transition, let me also just say that to you and your colleagues, one, thank you for carrying the torch on this issue, which is so critical. And two, I don't know if you heard remarks just before we came back on live. You know, we've been almost putting out a request for proposals. We're interested in concrete, actionable, fundable proposals because we have the opportunity to make those investments this year. And to the degree that those investments need to be in a budget and need to be supported through possible legislation, we want to make sure we get that work done before we vote the bill out. So
great context. We appreciate that. And we'll have some ideas to share with you as we get started. And certainly feel free to ask any questions of anyone here or follow up with us if we can provide any support as you work through this process. But as I said, this is part of an Energy Action Network team. And we were convened starting back in September when at EAN's annual conference, this effort was selected as one of their focused efforts that they would provide some support to. And we've had great success so far working with the team at EAN, with May, Cara, Jared. Just really appreciate their support so far. As I noted, I co-chair the initiative with Representative Gabrielle Stebbins, who's here today, who many of you probably know. We have regular meetings. They include a steering committee, which has a number of folks who are plugged into weatherization workforce questions. So some of those organizations are represented here today. We have a monthly climate workforce coalition meeting, and we have 3 working groups underway, a couple that I think will really interest you. The first is actually weatherization workforce. We've begun meeting with folks around the state, and this dovetails with the work you probably heard about EAN's Weatherization at Scale initiative. This is a logical pickup of that work where we are focused very much on the specific actionable items that you've described that you want to see advance, because we all recognize the unique moment that we're in, both as it relates to the state, but also some of the funding opportunities that are out there. The other thing I really want to let you know is that while we are focused on climate workforce, there is no definition for that in the existing codes that the federal government and the Labor Department uses as they look at different sectors of the economy and workforce. So we are actually working right now with a group to go line by line through the NAICS codes, which are the North American Industry Classification System codes that the federal government uses to pull out what professions might fit under the umbrella of climate workforce. And certainly weatherization is a big part of that. Just to give you a sense of the ecosystem here, the stakeholders, this was a slide that we used when we first pitched our climate workforce idea to the entire Energy Action Network group at their annual summit. And this will not surprise you. This is an incomplete web, but it speaks to the component pieces that really play into both climate workforce and weatherization workforce. And these will look familiar to you, no doubt. But we're thinking about the ways that we can actually identify gaps in policy to think about how these unite. And I'm pleased to see that later today, you had testimony scheduled from members of the administration who are really well versed in pieces of this web. But certainly it's something that we're thinking about and that you'll hear more from the witnesses as they get into details about their ideas. The last thing I just want to call out is this segment of workforce, be it weatherization workforce or climate workforce, it benefits Vermont directly. These are excellent careers. They are well-paying jobs. They provide a career pathway, and oftentimes one job might lead to the next. And we hear about this all the time about you might start inspecting homes, doing inspections of crawl spaces, doing weatherization work, and that may lead to another profession, another credential or another training. And maybe at some point you're installing heat pump water heaters or something else. So these are excellent careers with a real career path. We think that's a very key element of this. Of course, this is familiar to you. The more improvement of our climate workforce we can do as we focus on local generation of power, electricity, weatherizing homes, all of that investment in economic activity, much of it stays here, certainly more so than our current energy system. So there's an opportunity to capture benefit in Vermont. And finally, of course, this will be no news to you. The state has instituted through the Global Warming Solutions Act emission reduction targets, and climate workforce is really the essential piece here. It is the doers, the people who are going to achieve this. So I'm going to stop my share for just a moment. I do want to just share with you a couple thoughts before I turn this all over to my colleagues here. But certainly, we are very much with the climate workforce team, very focused on weatherization workforce. I will say that as we hone in and focus on our definitions for climate workforce more broadly, we really want to think about this as a sector by sector approach to understand where we can actually turn over some more work, make connections. And that's what this coalition is all about. I will share my personal view. Senator Bray, very helpful for you to talk about the funding pieces, which you will hear from some of my colleagues about. But certainly my personal view, the view of VGS, we were thrilled to see $35 million in the governor's budget for moderate income weatherization, to see $45 million for low income weatherization retrofits. We think that's positive. And just as a general rule, as I think about this, it's really three pieces. You probably think about this all the time. It's really the incentives that bring down the cost for Vermonters to do this type of work. It's then having a financing mechanism so that whatever cost remains, they have a way to do it. And VGS and others have been participating in models looking at on-bill tariff financing and so forth. We think that's a positive approach. Anything we can do to make it easier for Vermonters to access these services is great. And then your focus today, and I'm going to turn it over to Gabrielle to just pick up the thread here, is workforce. And that's really having the people to do the work required to meet these Global Warming Solutions Act greenhouse gas reduction goals. So that's my quick elevator pitch for what the Energy Action Network team is doing. And you will hear more and be able to ask many questions as we go. So I hope it's all right if I turn it over to Representative Stevens now.
Yes, thanks. And I'm glad that in your ecosystem chart, which is a term we've been using for years in here, because it is a complicated system with lots of parts, and we don't succeed when we don't see it as a complete system. You know, we end up with gaps that can be sort of like fatal flaws in the design of something. It's also helpful to us that the chair of the Senate Education Committee is on this committee as well, since there's a major connection to the world of education and making people aware of attractive careers in the trades and professions. So, all right, with that, good morning, Representative Stevens. Thank you, Mr. Giambattista.
Good morning. Thank you so much for inviting us. For the record, I am Representative Stevens. I serve in the House Transportation Committee, which is currently hearing about a $20, $40, and $60 million funding gap over the next 3 years. So as soon as I'm done with my testimony, I'll go back to the committee room rather than stay here, but I'm always available for questions or follow-up. I also am a managing consultant with Energy Futures Group, which is working on quite a few workforce initiatives, both locally as well as nationally. And my job previous to that, I was executive director of a trade association for renewable energy, which is sort of what brought me into this conversation of how do we fill these gaps? As someone who was raised with, you're going to go to college, that's where you go. It was really eye-opening for me in my day job to learn and to interview people who make $180K a year because they own their own business installing heat pumps, and they never went to college. You know, they started off with a 4-week internship, which expanded into a 3-month training program, which expanded into additional certifications. And now, you know, this particular fellow who lives in Southern Vermont, you know, has a pretty decent sized income with 25 employees and really bringing so much to the state of Vermont. So the reason why I understand that the focus that you guys are talking about right now is on weatherization, but the reason why we've really focused on the climate workforce is because one of the top things we have heard as we've worked with 40 to 50 different entities is that there is a real stigma and a real lack of understanding of what the pathways are. So if you start with air sealing and insulation, and if you're crawling around in an attic or a really dusty, wet, mildewy basement, where does that job lead to? And what are those ladder steps to really develop into a career? So I understand and I recognize that the focus here today is really on weatherization workforce, and that's critical. But I also just, I thank you for your willingness to deal with the fact that I'm going to keep talking about weatherization as part of a climate pathways, because that's really how we're going to get Vermonters interested in this over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Because yes, we can get people trained in the next 4-6 weeks if we have the funding and the tools in place for weatherization, but we need to keep them engaged and we need to explain to them why this is a valuable initial step in their career.
Right.
So
Can I jump in
yeah.
just by way of reassurance? So although we're putting weatherization front and center, I think, the work that we started calling it last year was, a green, I'm forgetting the precise term. Like, we had a lot of people in talking about building science and then green building science. And then we talked about how do you make it into a career pathway. And I'm guessing you've seen the VEIC report that came out of last year's bill, where they enumerated a whole series of steps from apprentice to journeyman, stuff like that. Okay, just wanted to make sure that we weren't talking past each other at all.
Great. That's reassuring. Thank you. So I just want to say, a key goal, Dylan had shown that that slide where you see educators, Department of Labor workforce, as well as, the entrepreneurs and the businesses, and then how do we connect all those dots? So a key element of this climate workforce initiative is not to reinvent the wheels. We have so many tools, so many entities in Vermont already doing so much of this work. The question is, where are the gaps, as Dylan said, and then how most strategically do we make the connections that need to occur? And I see that Senator Campion has raised his hand.
No, I'm just a little confused. Is this a House bill that we're getting a report on? I apologize, Mr. Chair. No, this is okay.
This is because Representative Stebbins is a co-chair of a work group that's been selected by EAN to help develop energy policy to the next level, just like we worked with the weatherization group based at EAN.
Got it.
Last year's.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Sorry about that. Representative Stebbins was a little confused. You usually don't have the honor of having House members testify before our committee, and we usually have them on the House side, but it's great. I'm so glad you're here.
Well, thanks. This is near and dear to my heart because it's one of the few triple wins. If we really do figure out how to reduce our fossil fuel emissions, we make a big impact in terms of climate change. We also can have really good paying jobs that people don't have to necessarily go into massive debt for 4 to 6 years of education. So it's a certain area of interest for me. I will note, though, since you asked, Senator, there is a House Bill 703, which is currently in Commerce House Committee, where they are also talking about workforce writ large. So you'll probably see this at some point, after crossover, and you'll see some probably overlap here and there. But so to back up, in terms of what this workforce goal, this coalition goal is, it's really to make sure that we're not reinventing the wheel. We're identifying which pathways in terms of the entities that currently exist that we need to connect, and then identifying the gaps that may exist that we can easily and swiftly implement as quickly as possible. So I just want to say we have like 40 to 50 people part of this group. Your future presenters coming up include, I do see Breck. Great that you can join from VYCC. We have been working with Vermont Technical College. Maureen Hebert cannot join us, but I'm going to touch upon briefly some of the many programs that they have ready to roll, like as of September, if we can figure this out in terms of getting the funding and getting the connections. We've also been working quite a bit with the career centers, who also couldn't make it today, but they're also ready to go. And I can follow up with information via email in terms of some of the programs and funding streams that they currently have ready to deploy. And then later after me, you will hear from Vermont Adult Learning. Then you'll also hear from a couple of the Serve, Earn, and Learn entity, the 4 nonprofits that are bringing a different model to this, but still a key element. And then you'll also hear from Resource, as well as from Dwight DeCoster and Paul Zabriskie from the weatherization side. And they'll be sure to really touch upon, Senator Bray, your comments and questions about energy consulting, because so much of this is really confusing. Do you start with solar? Do you start with heat pumps? But I see all these ads for windows. So what do I do? So really quickly, I'll just say, in terms of what we have heard from this climate workforce initiative, is that the number one, from 40 to 50 different entities, the number one most important item to fund is a recruitment and education campaign, and to make sure that Vermonters know where these jobs can go. Where do you go to get trained? How much might you get paid? Then how do you connect to a business and an employer? And then where to from there? So this is the number one recommendation. And what I've heard from folks is $4 million over 3 years to just keep it consistent and to keep it, maintained, so that we develop that information, so that we have guidance counselors saying, hey, this might be an area of interest for you, as well as in the adult learning world, as well as through VTC, as well as the career centers. We've also heard, and I believe you've spoken about this, the need for training subsidies to really allow contractors and businesses to take on lightly skilled learners via internships, to subsidize wages for new hires and interns, to provide scholarships for further training, support for other costs. For example, if you don't have any money to stop working to go get trained so you can get a better job is really challenging. The funding element proposal there was $1.5 million over 3 years, and this does align with the governor's recommend. Also, as you'll hear from Breck, and you'll also hear from Andrew from Resource, a proposal to expand the Serve, Earn, and Learn program. So this is a program for partnering nonprofits, Resource Vermont, Vermont Works for Women, Vermont Youth Conservation Corps, and Audubon Vermont. And that recommendation was $12 million for 3 years. building upon the current program. And then the other key item, training and career path programs. So essentially to really make sure that we're putting in the funding to entities like career centers, VTC, the folks who are ready to go, making sure that we have the funding to make sure that we are able to expand that geographically throughout the state with the trainers needed. And I see a question.
Senator Campion.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Representative Stevens. So just for, I know as the chair of Ed, are these proposals, would we anticipate seeing these come over in the House budget? I suspect, you're not here.
I can't speak to H703. I can say that I have been speaking.
Right, I understand. I would think, just given that, okay, so you're here advocating for the Senate to do this work. I just want to clarify.
I am here to, okay, because I'm a co-chair of the EAN Climate Action.
Yeah.
And that entity has worked to put forth key recommendations. And okay, I happen to have also been asked by House Commerce. Yeah. So I have shared this information with them. Where that goes, we will see. They are working on a much larger workforce. They're looking at nursing, they're looking at childcare. Right. So it's a much larger initiative. I'd be happy to follow up with you in the event that it appears that something will be coming from the House side.
Right, and I just trying to figure this out in terms of process, and this might be a question for the chair. The House has the budget. I would think that that's where folks would also be working on these issues, but it sounds as though it's not being advocated for on that side. Senator Bray, I don't know if you can help me with this.
Yep, thanks. This is especially around this time of year where things are moving and we need to make sure the gears are meshing. By agreement between House and Senate leadership, we are doing weatherization and sending it to the House, just as they're doing clean heat standard and sending it to us. So that's why we're everyone that we're hearing from people to try to build in as much as we can to the bill that we send, knowing that it will get looked at again and on the House side. And then as the budget matures, I think there'll be a chance to start bringing, to start naming and listing programs and looking for funding streams for them. So what's new for me, and I think all of the committee this morning is, so now we have a list of 4 different proposals that all need funding. And until today, we really didn't have any proposals to fund. We had a general sense of all the players out there, all the kinds of things that might happen, but they hadn't coalesced into a proposal and then funding to support the proposal. So we're making progress. But thanks for that question.
No, I really appreciate that. Thank you both. That helped.
Representative Stebbins, so the last one with career center.
Senator Bray, you have some questions.
Okay, well, thank you. Let me just get the numbers straight and then we'll go to Senator McDonald. The first one was recruitment and education campaign, 4 million over 3 years. So roughly 1.3. I mean, we're not talking about 4 million each year for 3 years, correct?
It was 4 million over 3 years. So 1.3.
Right. Training subsidies, 1.5. Serve, earn, learn, 12. And then career centers. I just didn't catch a number for that.
So that would be 3 million over 3 years or 1 million per year.
Okay. All right, great.
There was one other item, since I'm fortunate to have Senator Campion here. One of the other items that was mentioned is the disincentive for high schools to send students to career centers. And I know that there was a report that was requested because of COVID. The report has only gotten so far. So it hasn't, ideally our state staff wouldn't have been swamped with COVID and they put more time into the report, but they've been swamped, understandably. And therefore, we don't necessarily have what their specific recommendations are from that report. If I recall correctly, the report mostly says we have to keep working on this when we have a little bit more airtime. But that is another area that has, continues to be mentioned that hasn't been addressed.
Sure.
No, thank you for that. And I think it's just in my mind as the chair of Senate Ed, and I recognize that this committee has more time to work on these things right now than Senate Ed. So I appreciate this committee working on it. Some of this stuff will have to sort of come our way. And that's why I was just checking to see if you'd had, and maybe you and I can sit down with the chair of House Ed just to make sure, and maybe Senator Westman also on a probes to make sure that we all understand the flow. Thank you.
Senator McDowell, you've been waiting patiently.
Oh, I have. I've been waiting impatiently for months. Representative Stebbins is talking about the stuff we never talk about, and without dealing with these different parts, nothing's going to happen. I've had a chart that I've sat around here for goodness knows how long that tries to deal with this issue, and I have taken the automobile industry as a model. And what Representative Stebbins and the various witnesses today are talking about is trying to solve the problem that the automobile industry solved decades ago. When I was a kid, people sold cars. If you want them repaired, you went to gas stations. If you wanted to pay for them, you went to banks. If you wanted to learn about the different cars, you had to go check them out. And that whole industry has, in one fell swoop, has marketing, sales, engineering, trained workforce, inspections of work, liability systems built in like our lemon law, payment systems, dealerships do the payments. You go into the dealer, you can sign and get your loan. They have a system that transfers dealerships and liens, and they have a funding systems. And the weatherization has none of those things. And when we have to answer the questions of how do you market this stuff, who goes out and does the sales, who does the engineering, and when you're dealing with engineering, you've got to meld people that work in basements to electric workers, plumbers, isolated specialists, and they all require skills, but someone has to be a subcontractor. And how do you set up the subcontracting system? And I know my committee members are getting impatient with me right now because these are the nuts and bolts that have to be dealt with. And we don't, as committee members, deal with them easily because they have to be broken down into appropriations and then farmed out to 6 or 7, as Representative Stebbins was mentioning, 6 or many different entities that then are in charge of spending the money and trying to blend them together into an organic marketing to delivery system that has to be invented on the fly. And which is why it's a hell of a lot easier to deal with fee baits, because all the stuff is in place and all you got to do is supply the money. That's my 1 sentence marketing for that one. But this is the grunt work, and we've got to tackle it. Then we have to convince our colleagues that the money is being well spent in these different buckets, which in the next 3 years, we hope the buckets come together into a organic delivery system. And we haven't been thinking about that, Mr. Chair, or at least trying to, it's appropriations, and we don't do appropriations. So I'm finished. Thank you, Representatives for Stebbins, for trying to pull this together and create something new that does not exist today, which is very difficult.
Thank you.
So Representative Stebbins said there are these different pieces. We've talked about them. They seem, all of them exist to some degree, but really, so the goal for the weatherization, if someone says, how much more do you want to do? I say, well, we want to double and double again the rate at which we're doing the work. That requires not just more money, but coordinated investments of the sorts that you're talking about. And one of the concerns I have is that I don't know that we need, and maybe you've thought about this in your working group, do we need sort of a director of the clean energy economy who can work across all these different groups in order to create a coordinated effort. I mean, I don't quite know how we assemble something as multidimensional as this without someone steadily helping to lead the way on it.
Well, I think at this point, that is what this workforce is doing, and that is why it exists, because there is a need for that. I don't know that you would need it in perpetuity. I think we are a small state. We're 650,000 people. We're the city of Boston. I think you'd need someone to do that for 2 to 3 years, maybe, or 1 to 2 years, to get to connect the dots, to take this work that a coalition of people just willing to show up, on their own dime, because it is so important. But I would imagine that once we've made those connecting pieces, and once we have the guidance counselors talking to the career centers, talking to Breck at VYCC, talking to Dwight at CVOEO, then it works. And I think I should stop talking so you can hear from all of our other fantastic witnesses.
Right. Well, Senator McCormick.
Muted.
We're missing the beginning of your remarks.
Sorry. Perhaps if Representative Stebbins wants to pass this off, someone else can answer it, any of you. For 30 years, 33 years, the issue that we've been dealing with, say in my 33 years in the Senate, always the issue is that there aren't enough jobs. When I first year started, the old House rep said, there's only 3 things you need to think about: jobs, jobs, and jobs. Thought he was clever. Now the problem has suddenly shifted to the opposite. We don't have enough workers. And one of the arguments we've always made for weatherization, and the main argument for weatherization is that it saves energy and will mitigate against global warming. And it also makes people's homes more comfortable and livable. But the secondary argument was always it will create jobs. Have your deliberations shifted into the new situation, which is that the problem is not that we don't have enough jobs, and the fact that we're creating jobs does not solve a problem. That's not a problem anymore. The problem is we don't have enough workers. How is that being addressed?
So actually, we this past summer, Ellen Kaler from Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund, along with Representative Tristan Tolino, started working on a mapping exercise to look at workforce writ large, because that's exactly the thing. We are now looking at this problem from the flip. We are taking that to map that for the climate workforce jobs specifically. We're still in that process, so I don't have answers for you yet, but I understand you all will be back in the building in a couple of weeks, and I'll be happy to follow up with you and have lunch and show you where we're at.
Okay, thanks, yeah. And Mr. Chairman, just indulge me in old man's war stories. The Sustainable Jobs Fund was my bill, and I take great pride in it every time I hear about it.
Well done.
Thank you.
And you really do need to hear from everybody else, because you have a great crew here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Representative Stebbins. I'd like to go next to Mr. Justice, David Justice. Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, Senator Westman, Senator McDonald, Senator Campion, and Senator McCormick. I'm David Justice, and I live in South Burlington. I'm the Associate Director and also the Reach Up Program Director for Vermont Adult Learning, which serves 7 out of our 14 counties in Vermont, including Chittenden, Franklin, Grand Isle, Addison, Rutland, Windsor, and Windham. I also serve on Vermont's Energy Action Network Climate Workforce Coalition, which you've heard about, to advance our state energy and climate targets. So thank you for the opportunity to testify today on S284. It's a bill that Vermont Adult Learning does endorse. I've been invited here today for 2 reasons. One, to share how Vermont Adult Learning's Energy Works program is currently contributing to the goals that are outlined in this bill. And secondly, to request your consideration to support statewide outreach and recruitment for other weatherization programs like Energy Works in reference to Representative Stebbins' summary on the recruitment and education campaign in particular. So a little bit about Vermont Adult Learning. We deliver reading, writing, math, English language learning, digital literacy, financial literacy instruction, along with academic and career advising, high school completion pathways, and workforce development programming. We support students who are 16 and older to work towards a future that they often never thought was possible, and our services are free. We have an ambitious goal, and that requires a very coordinated team effort. Our Energy Works program fits into that configuration. We tap into the expertise and enthusiasm of community partners with a training and placement model that has shown to work so far. We coordinate program design, recruitment, delivery, and post-completion job placements, specifically with the Office of Economic Opportunity Weatherization Assistance Program. David Keith, he's the weatherization trainer, is a past recipient of the Linda Wingington Leadership Award, which celebrates visionary leaders doing extraordinary work in the field. And Keith has over 3 decades in the field as a practitioner and as one who provides both classroom and hands-on training specifically for our weatherization modules now, which prepare students for the Building Performance Institute nationally recognized certification in building science principles, which we just referenced recently. Vermont Adult Learning's Energy Works program is aligned and stands ready to bolster S28's goals, specifically around weatherizing 120,000 housing units to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, save Vermont families and business substantial fuel costs, and increase the volume and scope of weatherization services for Vermonters that are experiencing low incomes. We've secured a number of grants to design and deliver this program. Currently, it's a 2-year integrated education and training program, preparing 90 to 120 low-income individuals for well-paying careers in weatherization, solar panel installation, and heat pump installation in time. It's also expanding access to these sustainable energy sources for low-income households. In addition, we have proposals under consideration right now with VEIC, as well as Bernie Sanders' congressionally directed spending to hopefully expand this program statewide. Currently, it's operating out of Rutland. We launched in September of 2021, and today we've had 17 individuals complete the program at an average cost of $2,687 per student. The program's 52 hours, spans over a 3-week period of time, 2/3 of that time in the classroom and 1/3 of that time on site. And of those 17 individuals, 14 are employed in weatherization today with an average starting salary of $18 an hour plus benefits. It represents that 100% of our course completion, and that 82.5% of our participants have had job placements. The employers have stated that participants who have gone through the Energy Work program, even if they were currently employed in weatherization, better understood the why of their job, the purpose of why they're involved in this field. It increased employee pride, their efficiency on the job, and will likely lead to stronger job retention in the field. Just one quick success story. We had a student, Trevor, he's 39-year-old father from Rutland. He had a school-aged child. He completed the Energy Works program in October 2021, and then started working at Brock on their weatherization crew, earning $18 an hour. Before that, Trevor was in hospitality, cleaning guest rooms, working for a hotel front desk for $13 an hour. So this means this 3-week training program earned him a 32.25% hourly wage increase with full benefits, including health and retirement. So certainly was an appeal to do this. Where we currently with our program most need support, which has come up already, is targeted outreach and recruitment to accelerate the number of participants in our program who will enter the weatherization workforce. And we believe that a professional, a broad-based, a state-supported recruitment campaign across media channels is critical to that. To recruiting the number of folks that we need to achieve the goals that we have to deliver the service and to generate a steady pipeline of crew workers in the field. We need to fill dozens and dozens of jobs today for crew positions. Plus, we want to be forward thinking and looking at youth and those that were soon to be entering the workforce, even kids that say, when I grow up, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a teacher, I want to be a lawyer. Well, we want them to say, I want to work in weatherization. I want to help the world from growing impacts of climate change too. So that kind of outreach on multiple levels is necessary. We feel that we need a full, concerted, multi-layered outreach and direct recruitment plan that will ensure we have enough employees interested in weatherization to carry out the state's goals over the next decade and beyond. Our expertise with Vermont Adult Learning is working with unemployed and underemployed individuals who need wraparound services to overcome a myriad of barriers to successful employment. We enhance Energy Works' value proposition by integrating instruction as well as job readiness skills. We want to ensure that participants have both the technical and the soft skills that are required for success on the job. We are also prepared to assist any Energy Works trainees who lack a high school credential to earn one alongside their job training. That's a prime piece of what we offer. Vermont Adult Learning's cadre of English language learning teachers are also prepared to work with New Americans, which is a potential referral source for workforce development as well, via classroom instruction, one-on-one tutoring, innovative work site-based programs. We have a program called English at Work that offers instruction to New Americans on the job, integrated with the training of that employer. We're also currently experiencing an influx of refugees. Rutland, for example, is resettling approximately 15 individuals that are escaping political turmoil in Afghanistan. With Vermont Adult Learning, we really believe that an educated workforce is an employed workforce, and our students and our trainees often remain in Vermont, and they form the backbone of our local economies and our communities. So we're positioned to grow Vermont's weatherization workforces and expand energy efficient housing stock via weatherization and eventually within heat pump and solar cell installation training as well, which will alternatively also expand access to and lower the cost for Vermonters at home and both that work. So here to just say we enthusiastically support this bill. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you very much, Senator Campion.
Thanks, Chairman Bray, and thanks, Mr. Justice. I'm wondering, do you have offices all through the state?
We do have learning centers in St. Albans, Burlington, Middlebury, Rutland, Brattleboro, and in Windsor.
But nothing in my county, in Bennington County.
Correct. We do not in Bennington.
Do you know why that might be? Are there other services there?
There are, yes.
I know, like, for example, the tutorial center and groups like that. And I didn't know
Correct.
if you partner with those in different ways or.
We do. Our executive director, Hal Cohen, helps lead an association of the 4 adult basic ed entities. Yep. And it's the tutorial center that serves Bennington County.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Mr. Justice, how did you find the 17 candidates for the program?
Through a lot of them through Brock directly and through our own outreach via Higher Ability and Career Workforce Solutions. And we did some radio and online marketing campaigns. I believe a strong number of those 17 participants came via Brock directly and only a handful through the community.
Okay. Thank you, which is Bennington, Rutland, what's OC? Brock, the acronym. I'm trying to remember. Bennington, Rutland, something. It's like the CVOEO of Rutland and Bennington counties, correct?
Correct. That is correct. Yeah.
Okay. Well, great. And how about, are you getting any feedback from the employers with whom you've placed your graduates?
Yeah, so far feedback has been outstanding. The feedback is we need to get more people in the seats for our training right now. We are seeing a recognition that I'd say the biggest feedback we've heard is that they're really finding a connection to the purpose of this work by going through our training, by having the hands-on training with David Keith, as well as the support with any education or basic ed that they might need and exposure to on-site work, that they're feeling connected to the mission and finding their purpose and their why to be a part of this, which is a reflection of a long-term commitment to the career path.
Right. Well, it's so thank you for sharing the story, and it seems pretty remarkable that in just 3 weeks of training you can help people see that kind of wage boost and into an industry that's going to have work for years to come, and probably many other opportunities over time as they become more experienced. All right. So thank you very much. Any committee questions for Mr. Justice before we move on to our next witness? Okay, thank you again. And with that, sorry, there was an adjustment on the fly. So I'm looking for, Andrew, sorry. I believe if you could introduce yourself, that I have you marked down as next, and I'm not sure if you are representing Resource, is that correct?
That's correct. So good morning, everyone. Andrew Jope. I'm the training director at Resource. I'm actually splitting my time this morning with Breck from VYCC. Breck's going to talk a bit about the Serve and Learn Collaborative, and then I'll talk about some of Resource's specific training programs in the weatherization realm. So Breck, great. I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thanks, Andrew. And Chairman Bray, thanks for your flexibility as we're making adjustments on the fly here.
Yeah, no problem.
For the record,
any good trail crew knows how to adjust on the fly, right?
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. For the record, my name is Breck Knopf. I'm from Huntington, Vermont. I'm the Executive Director of Vermont Youth Conservation Corps. Thank you to the committee for this opportunity to speak this morning to discuss opportunities, and of course for the work developing policy that stewards Vermont's landscape that we all love. I'm here really to offer perspective and context on the Serve, Learn, and Earn program. And my hope is to strike a purely practical note. Our work intersects because if we're going to meet the variety of conservation and climate goals, as a clear theme has come through this conversation this morning, we need a workforce that's well trained. And the Serve, Learn, and Earn program is a strategy that we think that can help the committee meet these goals. So I'll offer just a little bit of history there, and then Andrew will speak to some of the weatherization aspects after I wrap up. So starting with history and what Serve, Learn, and Earn is, it's a collaboration between VYCC, Resource, Vermont Works for Women, and Audubon Vermont. And our organizations over our histories have worked together, but what became clear that towards the end of 2020 is that we could have greater impact if we really leaned into collaboration. VYCC was working to create not just more paid service opportunities and training opportunities, but to really enhance the quality of these experiences and to create pathways to future jobs and continued learning. And so we reached out to Resource, Vermont Works for Women, Audubon, and said, hey, let's think this through together. Each partner has different strengths. And so we're able together to create a stronger, more comprehensive, more responsive network, if you will. There's also a philosophy that guides our collaboration. And that is that if you're someone who's willing to give of yourself and serve our state, then the state should be here for you. There should be clear and accessible pathways to work and continued learning. So in that sense, it's a compact. If you get to Vermont, Vermont will be here for you. We're thankful we received an appropriation from last year's legislative session. It's really helped us increase our impact. So thank you to committee members who are supportive of that request. Also, I want to thank Commissioner Snyder at FPR. He and the team there have been exceptionally helpful. A couple more thoughts. Our impact is very much statewide. One of the real strength of the shared work can be seen in our geographic scope, both in terms of where we're completing projects and where members are from. So we hire members from the Northeast Kingdom down to Brattleboro. The projects are all over Vermont, from Groton down to Dorset. We have prepared an interim report for Forest Parks and Rec. We're on track or exceeding each of the targets that we've established in partnership with FPR. Some numbers here might be helpful. In the first 7 months, we've hired 252 participants who've completed over 2,100 hours, 2,100 service weeks, not hours, weeks. Of those 252 participants, 85 are AmeriCorps members. And that's relevant because each AmeriCorps position comes with a Siegel Education Award. Those are dollars that members can use to defray the cost of college and continued education. In the coming years, we'll greatly expand our impact. So we project hiring and training over 1,700 participants who will complete over 13,000 weeks of service and provide over $7 million in wages and stipends to these participants. So there's a real opportunity to take something to scale. A key component of the program is that it's a model that's built on participants completing projects. So in this sense, we're not just funding workforce development, but also infrastructure. We're catching two birds with the same berry, to use an Audubon-inspired phrase. Conservation, weatherization, food security, outdoor recreation, public lands, infrastructure. Those are all projects that we're focused on. And again, Andrew will speak to the weatherization in just a minute. Final thoughts here. We're very grateful for the support we've had. Stating the obvious, the best way to prepare someone for the workplace is to offer them a job, one that pays them and one that trains them. And so, yes, we're asking funds for our organization, but the funds are really for the participants who are training. We're requesting a $12.1 million appropriation in this year's budget. It would be spent over 3 years. Senator Campion, I heard your question about process. We have testified in House Commerce and House Natural Resources committees. The House is taking up, House Commerce is taking up the Workforce Development Bill, that's 8703. We're cautiously optimistic that will be included in that bill before it comes over to the Senate.
Great, thanks.
Yep. And I think I'll stop there. One of the things that's exciting is to think about the way in which our organizations can design curriculum and credentials across different organizations. On that note, we're really grateful for the expertise of Resource, because they're really on the cutting edge of thinking through how you offer short, intensive trainings that are both credentialed and clear pathways for future opportunities for participants. So, Chairman Bray, does it make sense to pass the mic over to Andrew, and then we could hear questions if people have them?
Sure. And I just want to say how exciting it is to me to watch how VYCC keeps growing and expanding the various ways in which, I think when I first met you, it was really much more trail crews. And now you've branched out into a lot of different areas. So,
Andrew, 2 seconds here. I can't. Thank you, Senator Bray. I think in part it's because what young people are interested in, and we're trying to be responsive to and put young people at the center there. And what does Vermont need? So how can an organization be innovative and responsive to the economic, social, demographic needs of the state? And so that's fun to be at that center of surveying the landscape and thinking about what else is possible.
Yeah, well, it's great that you're doing that. Senator Campion.
Thanks. Thanks, Mr. Knopf. How long have you been there now?
I've been at BYCC since 2008.
Great. Okay, that's terrific. Great. Well, thanks for your work. It's a well-respected organization, I think, across the legislature and across the state. Appreciate the project in Dorset. Also went and visited that not too long ago.
Yeah, Alice at Town Forest is a fantastic place to go for a hike.
Yeah. Great. Keep coming south. Keep coming south.
Okay, yeah, we're trying.
Thank you.
All right, Andrew, all yours.
Okay, thank you, Breck. Thank you to the members of the committee for allowing me to speak with you this morning. Once again, my name's Andrew Jope. I'm the training director at Resource, and I'm just going to speak to you a little bit about programs and training we have currently underway to help develop the weatherization workforce and what expanding that work might look like. For those of you who know us or maybe don't know us, Resource is a nonprofit training provider. We're in 4 locations across the state in Barre, Burlington, Williston, and Hyde Park. And increasingly, we're expanding kind of beyond our bricks and mortar footprint to offer training opportunities to Vermonters all over the state. If you do know us as a training provider, perhaps you're familiar with our Youth Build program. We've been operating Youth Build programs out of Barre, Burlington since 2004, Barre since 2008. Youth Build is a program for 16 to 24-year-old youth who have unenrolled from high school, provides them with a pathway to completing a high school credential that often comes in collaboration with Vermont Adult Learning. And I know we just heard from David. Gives them training in construction trades, offers them an AmeriCorps service year, and also gives them support in transitioning into the workforce. And in 2018, we started to think a little bit more creatively about how to continue developing the workforce. Our role, again, to that point, had very much been focused on youth. And in 2018, we started working with the mayor's office and CEDO in the city of Burlington to start opening up training to adults. And, you know, just so you know, Resource, our mission is very much to train adults with barriers to employment, or train Vermonters with barriers to employment, and help provide them with the technical skills and the supportive services that they need to move into the workforce. So in 2018, with CEDO's support in Burlington, we piloted what we now call our intensive programs. And our intensives are 6-week programs, full-time, paid, in which the first 4 weeks are dedicated to technical training and career development. And then the final 2 weeks are what we call the work experience phase, where we take participants transitioning out of the program, we place them with employers who are looking to hire for usually a series of 2 to 3 short-term work experiences. And the goal is that they'll emerge from that with multiple job offers, and that has indeed been the case. We've been very successful in moving people into the construction trades. 2 years ago, we thought it would be a good idea to expand this model to specifically address the demands, the workforce demands in the weatherization sector. And so we developed a course called Weatherization 101, very much predicated on the same model: 4 weeks of technical training and career development, plus 2 weeks of partnered training with employers. Through that Weatherization 101 course, participants are trained through the Department of Energy's Weatherization Technician curriculum. They also get some NCCER training in hand tools, power tools. They get OSHA 10 safety certification training. And again, we found no shortage of employers. I know Dwight from CVOEO is gonna, is I think maybe up next even. CVOEO has been one of our best partners in both welcoming our participants on work experience placements during that final 2 weeks of the program, and also ultimately hiring them. And I'm pretty confident that Dwight would affirm that we're helping to provide good employees, well-trained employees to CVOEO and other weatherization providers right now, specifically in Chittenden County. We are in the process of expanding across the state, as I said, into regions where we don't necessarily have bricks and mortar training facilities. And our construction training, I think, provides the blueprint for that. We are in the process, through a contract with Hireability, to move that construction intensive, Construction 101, to 8 counties across the state over the next 2 years, where we acquire space, you know, through community relationships, and gain access to employers for the purposes of work experiences, and are moving around. Basically, we kind of airlift into a community for 6 weeks, provide training, connections to employers, and then we do follow all of our participants for 1 year after they graduate and after they transition into employment. And that can look like a lot of different things. We can still help provide supportive services around transportation, childcare, things like that. We'll typically sit in on performance evaluations, at least to start, with our graduates and the employer, just to make sure if there's any issues that arise, we're available to help iron things out. I think we all have an interest in making sure people are not just placed in employment, but retained in employment. And we're very much focused on that 12-month period after graduation to make sure that our participants and our graduates are being retained. To this point, we've been offering Weatherization 101 once a year out of our Burlington site. I know Senator Bray, you talked about doubling and doubling again. We actually have designs on tripling this year. We're in the process of seeking new communities to bring this training to. Right now, we're working with NITO in St. Johnsbury to bring our Weatherization 101 training up to the Northeast Kingdom in April. And then we'd like to also identify a new community to bring the training to this fall. I think the training's been very successful. I think the most eye-popping statistic I can give you, graduates of our intensive programs have a 95% job placement rate with starting wages of over $17 an hour. And so we are ready to expand and take this to scale. We're excited to expand and take this to scale. I think one other thing, and this might echo something David just spoke about too, I think one other value we're bringing into the workforce development system here is that we're bringing in a new demographic into the workforce. As I said, by mission, we're serving Vermonters with barriers to employment. What that looks like are people coming out of the corrections system, people who are unemployed or underemployed. We're increasingly seeing a lot of people who've been kind of professionally upended through COVID find their way into our training programs. And so these are people at the margins of the workforce who we are bringing into the workforce in a period of 6 short weeks, providing them with the training they need, the supportive services they need, and the connections to employers that they need to be successful. So I think I'll pause it there. Again, just testifying in support of this bill, and just, it's really heartening to just sit here and listen to the other presenters to, really be conceiving of this as an ecosystem and how the parts fit together, and trying to bring some strategy and some comprehensiveness to that workforce development system. So very appreciative of your work and very heartened to learn of your efforts.
Well, we're appreciative of your work. Like last year when we had a conversation about this, about roughly a year ago, we were also sort of starting in terms of learning about who's in the ecosystem and what was going on. And it seems as though happily it's been a very active ecosystem in the year in between. So that's heartening for us, because we want to support people who are doing things. So congratulations on the great job placement rate. How many people have you graduated so far in Weatherization 101, and how many people annually would you like to get to?
So our cohorts are, we do 8 participants at a time because it's very intensive hands-on training. So we've done 2 cohorts so far, so that's 16 people. Construction 101, we're also doing 7 cohorts a year, so that's 56 people. And if we are to scale up Weatherization 101, I think this year we'd like to do that course 3 times, which would be 24 individuals. We're training specifically for weatherization.
Okay, thank you very much. Any committee questions for Mr. Joe? All right, well, great. Well,
thank you.
Thank you again for coming in along with your colleagues. Good morning, Mr. DeCoster. Good to see you again.
Good morning, Senator Bray and fellow committee members. As Senator Bray said, I'm Dwight DeCoster. I'm the Director of Champlain Valley Weatherization Services, a program of Champlain Valley Office of Economic Opportunity. Paul and I are going to split things up a little bit. I'm going to talk a little bit more about workforce and workforce development, and Paul's going to talk about the energy counselors because he has more experience with that than I do. So
Great.
my goal to give you an update of where we stand on our workforce actions taken over the past year to build and recruit, what has worked well for us and where we can improve. Last July, we entered into grants with OEO for Home Weatherization Assistance Program, Department of Energy, and ARPA funds. Our goal was to do just shy of 300 housing units at an average of 114 crew hours per unit. These numbers show we would need 15 crew members and support staff to do this work. This would require us to increase by 4 crew members from what we had then, 1 crew chief, 1 energy coach, and 1 building energy auditor. Our business model is that we promote from within as much as we can when we are hiring for positions that require advanced experience, such as energy coach and building energy auditor, to show our new employees that there is a career pathway, which is extremely important to us. So we started in July with 11 folks on our crew. The good news is that we were able to hire 5 crew members since then. The bad news is that due to not 1 promotion, 2 retirements, and 2 folks that left for other opportunities, we are in no better position today than we were then, as we have 11 crew members, including a young woman we just hired that will join us next Monday. In today's difficult job market, I believe we have done well to add approximately 1 new staff member every month and a half. We have done this through utilizing job advertisements on various websites, as well as our own website. OEO has supported the CAPS with the creation of hiring PSAs, front porch forum campaigns, radio talk show appearances, and radio ads. But as you've heard earlier today, one of our most successful relationships is that which with Resurces. 3 of our new hires have come through our long-term relationship with Resurces through their Construction 101 program. And 2 of those came to us as a result of a referral from someone within the resource program. Our last new employee was actually the son of one of Resurces staff members. So, and then the young lady we just hired, we've been recruiting her for several years in hopes to help her get a better position in her career. We've also spent significant energy this year in building relationships with local high schools and technical centers. The goal is to build a workforce pipeline that is reliable and predictable. We want to show young Vermonters who have the desire and the energy that there's a great career in the weatherization field. We were seeing some success with this endeavors with multiple job shadows set up. We actually completed one of those, students from Essex Technical Center, until Omicron variant forced a halt on these. We hope our efforts will lead to new hires this June. We're seeing how that plays out. Our statewide program is currently working with Vermont Adult Learning on a new model class where students get a week's worth of building science education, along with some hands-on experience working in the field with a weatherization program or contractor. You heard a little bit about that. These classes have been run in the Rutland area and have been run 3 or I think there's a 4th one going on. The class capacity is 8. Brock was able to put many of which Bennington Rutland Opportunity Council
Thank you.
was able to put many of their new crew members through this valuable training with David Keefe while adding an average of 1 new person to the weatherization field per session. One of the largest obstacles in our recruitment efforts has been the wage, which we are able to offer new employees. Currently, CVOO weatherization offers $18 an hour to start. Prior to the current workforce situation, this wage was comparable to starting wages in other similar trades. This is not the case now. We expect to see some movement as OEO is going to implement a minimum prevailing wage across all weatherization programs under their purview at $20 to $21 an hour for new crew members and a corresponding increase for crew chiefs with increased funding to support this. We are excited for this as not only will it give our current staff a significant reason to stay with us, but give us equal footing when competing for employees in the job market. So you might ask, what do we need in order to reach the weatherization workforce necessary to reach the 2030 goals? We need to increase interest in being a part of this field. I was presenting to a work program yesterday, and at the end during the question and answer period, I asked one of the attendees what they thought of an opportunity within the weatherization field. The response was, I don't do insulation. I think this sums up the perception by many of our field. We need to show that it is much more than insulation. We need to portray it as something much greater. We need a statewide expansion of a program built on the resource principles of basic construction principles, introduction to building science, and weatherization basic techniques, followed by job shadow experiences with weatherization programs and contractors. I am a huge fan of resources, and I think that's the model that we see working. Crew members entering into the field that come with a very basic knowledge of construction and weatherization work is what we as providers need. Existing programs within our programs will take care of the follow-on learning as long as existing supports are maintained. We have found that it takes at least 6 months for folks new to the work to become full-fledged crew members. Many will argue it is a year-long process. We need to work with programs such as Vermont Works for Women, Vermont Adult Learning, Voc Rehab, and working fields to attract potential workers where there have been perceived barriers to employment in this field, as was mentioned earlier. We also need to support to build a brick and mortar weatherization training center located in Vermont. This would be similar to what OEO is working on in order to provide centralized, efficient, consistent, and easily accessible basic and advanced trainings to improve our existing and future workforce. Access to follow-on training that allows staff members to prepare for and take on advanced roles, show a career path is available. Finally, it's not an easy task to develop a workforce in this highly constrained environment. Housing, cost of living, and increased competition for each and every worker are all things we fight against each day. Our work is dirty and tough, but the rewards are strong. We need to provide strong wages, second to none training, and a proven career path in order to attract and maintain the necessary workforce to meet the very aggressive goals that have been set for this industry. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Senator McDonald.
Apologize. Senator McCormick was trying to get back online and asked me to just tell Jude to let him back in again.
Okay.
So,
all right.
I apologize to the witness. Technical.
Mr. DeCoster, so I've heard in the past that concerns about wages. So it sounds like good news to me that you're going to be able to cross the $20 an hour threshold. And one of the things I've heard about, and let me just double check, make sure I'm remembering right, is that CVOEO and Capstone and others, the OEOs, do offer benefits along with that wage. And sometimes private sector employment at that level doesn't necessarily come with benefits. So are you, one, let me confirm that. And two, how important do you find that as a feature of the package you offer to people who are coming in? Do they say, well, I could make more there, but I won't have any health insurance or whatever?
We do offer a very good benefits package. As an employee, I often say that I love our benefits package. As an employer, I say I hate it because of the amount of time off that we have. But we do offer a very competitive benefits package. It's very complete. Nonprofits often say we can't pay you much, but we'll give you great benefits. But that is becoming the opportunity to compete against folks that don't have a benefits package is very rare these days. Most folks have realized that benefits are a huge part of it, and especially in this industry. And the importance of that benefits package has to do with the age of the participant and the relationship to their parents. I have this discussion with my 25-year-old because I cover him on his health insurance benefit. So I tell him to ask for more money because you're not taking benefits. And that we find that to be the case in our industry as well, is that, under 26 years old, they are still, most of them are still eligible under their parents. So it depends on the age and their relationship to their parents as to whether that benefits package is a strong selling feature or not.
Okay, thank you. And about how many people, okay, so you're, you already gave us the numbers. You were at 11, you added 5, you had some retirements, some people move on. And however fortunate or unfortunate, you're a training ground for people to go on to other private sector jobs in this, probably in the same work, right?
We have lost candidates to some of our surrounding weatherization folks, but we often lose the last two that we lost. 2 of the last 3 we lost were because the work was too hard and too dirty for them and not enough money. So like I said, hopefully increasing that wage to $20 or $21 an hour is going to help us in that fight.
Right. And last quick question is, we talked last spring with you and others about green building science and the whole notion of a career pathway, opportunities, acknowledging that people may be starting in a crawl space or an attic, right? How is that something that you see as a real opportunity? We don't want to just sort of sell it well, but it really, the pathway's not there. How do you see this, the industry sort of growing or not?
Well, like I said in my testimony earlier, it's very important that new folks come in, and we say there's 3 tracks that they can go down in our organization, and we really promote this, that it's a career. You can go down, you can stay in the field for a while and become a crew chief and then move on to the production world, as most of our folks do. A lot of our folks do. My production coordinator has been with the program over 30 years and started out on the crew. There's an admin track for qualification and the paperwork end of things. And I have one of my admin team who started as the crew. And then also we have the technical track, which is your energy coach, your targeted high use coach, your building energy auditor, and my tech team lead, who was my right-hand person, started on the crew, was a crew chief, became a building auditor, and now is the manager.
Right.
So we really try to understand very early on where each of our new crew members wants to go, where they see themselves going, and support them in those roles. It's all part of the overall workforce culture that we try to create, that within our building there is a track. You can go far. I was the first one to bring on a heating tech because of the choke point with the heating trades. And we now have, I think it's the first official plumbing apprentice that is within our program. And Cody started on the crew about 3 years ago. And that was an area that he wanted to deal with. So we made it work. And with the increased work that's out there, we were able to move him over there in an apprentice position. So we got to show them that there's a pathway forward to easier, well, maybe not easier, but cleaner work.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much. Any committee questions for Mr. DeCoster before we go to Mr. Zabriskie?
No, but it was very helpful. Thank you.
All right. Thanks very much. Congratulations on everything that's going on. And thanks for coming back again.
And Dwight, what is your 25-year-old doing now for work?
My 25-year-old is a game designer in Lowell, Massachusetts.
That's great.
And he works part-time gigs to get just enough of cash to keep his game going. So
that's great. That's great.
Okay.
Thanks for sharing.
Thank you again, Mr. DeCoster. So, Mr. Zabriskie, good to see you too. Thanks for coming back.
Good day. Good day. Thanks for having me. For the record, Paul Zabriskie, Capstone Community Action, Weatherization and Climate Impact Director. I think actually you've heard most of the content I might have addressed from others, so I don't think I need to repeat it. I do want to point out that unfortunately Vermont Works for Women was not able to be with us today. And another really important piece in this is making sure that we're drawing from all of the workforce, not just 50% of the workforce. And weatherization tends to be, while physically uncomfortable, relatively light for construction work, and a good opportunity for young women, although they're not particularly drawn to it. So I think addressing the recruiting and education and engaging with Vermont Works for Women is another important component of this that I'm not really qualified to speak to their programming, but I do want to make sure we highlight the importance of their role. I think I will touch on a number of weatherization issues that may not be directly workforce related, but have to do with sort of the effectiveness of how we implement the money we're putting into weatherization as it relates to S284. Unfortunately, my colleague Liz Scharf was not able to join to talk about the financial and energy coaching. She's directing that program. The coaches have all but one have been hired. They are in training as we speak, and they are rolling out that program. I think their first public launch is next week. And so that program is really getting off the ground. And I think we're excited about the complement, the talent that we've recruited to the roles. Suminter wanted me to reiterate a request for 2.2 million for supports to induce activity out of that program to help people take that first step. And she can speak to that more clearly at a later date. I wanted to touch on just the role of weatherization and its relationship to decarbonization. And I think, the Climate Action Plan put a lot of emphasis on weatherization, and in particular, the low-income program, which exists outside of the Public Service Department, ANR, and transportation, where many of the emissions goals are really at home. But weatherization has an incredibly important role to play in the Climate Action Plan. But emissions control or emissions reduction is not actually part of the mission of the Office of Economic Opportunity and the Weatherization Assistance Program. And I think that's something that should be addressed. One of the reasons is it opens the door for looking at the formulas we use to implement measures. One of the great things about the Weatherization Assistance Program is we do the math, right? We test buildings. We do work that is proven cost effective. Our savings to investment ratio is one of the critical parameters that decide what we can do and can't do on a job site. But we don't value carbon savings in our savings to investment formulas. The Climate Action Plan put forward a social cost of carbon metric. And I think with the committee's support, with the legislator's support, incorporating CO2 goals into the mission of the Office of Economic Opportunities delivery of the Weatherization Assistance Program, and enabling it to make the technical changes in the formulas to value CO2 emissions. This is important for me because as we get closer to making the improvements in homes, we have this huge fixed cost when we walk into a building. We've paid to go through all the eligibility stuff and application, and now we're putting trained eyes in the building and collecting data that will devise the weatherization scope for the crews. But that staff are also fully capable of doing assessments of the electrical infrastructure in the building. So when we talk about electrify everything, weatherization is in a professional role to support that household in that. It's not currently our charge. We have included some resources for heat pumps, but very often we run into infrastructure problems where the service into the building can't support the loads that we all will see as we move away from fossil fuels and towards electrifying our lives, whether it be heating our buildings, heating hot water, transportation, cooking, clothes drying. So I think one of my concerns is this can be quite expensive. And I'm not sure that the resources are there to do it for everybody that weatherization serves. One of the things I've learned as we administered the Mileage Smart program, a transportation program that provides assistance to income qualified people to access highly efficient used cars. We see a real difference between the financial capability of folks who are 60 to 80% of median income versus folks who are enrolled in LIHEAP, and which is probably closer to 50% of median income from the top of my head. One of the things LIHEAP eligibility does, first of all, it gives you access to lots of programs, whether it be heating assistance or SNAP, the critical food assistance for families. a whole range of benefits hinge on LIHEAP, and it is the eligibility for it is determined by the Office of Economic Services within the Department of Children and Families, and it involves means testing. It's a somewhat onerous application process, but at the end of that process, you have identified a household that do not have a stash of resources somewhere that can help them with those large purchases. And what we see in Mileage Smart is as you get closer to 80% of median income, you run into retirees who have a nest egg. You run into folks who have other assets. They draw a relatively modest income, so they income qualify, but they have resources for large one-time purchases. And decarbonizing our lives involves choices at critical points where we're purchasing infrastructure. We're purchasing a furnace. Are we going to buy another fossil fuel furnace that's going to operate for 20 years, or are we going to make that transition? And we want as a society to make that decision outside of the duress of a failed furnace, right? We want to be intentional and in front of this process. Folks who are eligible and enrolled in LIHEAP just do not have the means to make that change. And I don't want to make sweeping generalizations about folks who are not enrolled in LIHEAP, but I encounter a difference there. So when we're dealing with relatively limited resources, and I understand there's a lot of resources available in the moment, but there's still limits. I think weatherization focusing a deeper decarbonization effort on LIHEAP eligible households would allow us to leverage that fixed cost we make in the front end services of auditing to really move those families today towards having the infrastructure that is ready if we don't already implement heat pumps, car chargers, heat pump hot water heaters. We have a program, Capstone is working with Washington Electric. We just were funded by V-Light for a pilot to target our LIHEAP enrolled clients who've had weatherization in the past, to work with Washington Electric to help build out their infrastructure, put in the 200 amp service, deal with everything from transformers on the pole to conduits underground, the panel, the meter socket. It can be quite extensive to make those upgrades that enable a household to consider the critical appliances that affect their carbon footprint. So just to reiterate, we love to see opportunities to use LIHEAP to differentiate the services within weatherization, to work with other players for people who have been weatherized. Once you're weatherized, we can't go back. But we've got thousands of homes that are still served by LIHEAP who have been through weatherization. We have some data history about that building that we can go back and help them with those service upgrades. And I don't necessarily think that's a role for Office of Economic Opportunity. I think their plate is very full. But resources that could go through VHFA or the Clean Energy Development Fund or other players who are key to this, that can put together the RFPs to engage the distribution utilities, engage other nonprofits or for-profits in getting the lowest income Vermonters on a pathway to decarbonization and transition. I think there's opportunities there. And with that, I'll stop talking and field questions if you have any.
Okay. Senator McDonald? Anything? Okay. So I know that last year we had some conversation with you, and I think Senator Westman brought it up, which was about changing the language some to recognize, I don't know, it sounds like we haven't got there yet, but to allow you to do your math differently, including greenhouse gas benefits, because we were saying, well, really underneath it all, besides the building a juster society that takes care of people at lower income levels who need such a fundamental thing like staying warm. We also are saying, is there an opportunity, to recognize and account for the greenhouse gas benefits that go with it, knowing that weatherization itself alone doesn't do all that much, but it's a precursor to making a home more eligible, more suitable for cold climate heat pumps, for instance, and other investments. And it sounds like we're not quite there yet on the language that would authorize a broader use. So I think what I'm really leading up to is, if you have, your authorizing statutes, if you could look at them and send us language that would sort of expand the scope of analysis in a way that you think works better and is more appropriate, then that would be helpful to us.
I would be happy to. I am not a lawyer.
Yeah.
So I would be happy to put the language as I understand it forward for the committee staff to maybe structure into something that would work as legislation.
Sure. Great. Well, that would be helpful. And we have legislative counsel to help us. And I see Mr. Poor in the room, across the street at Department of Public Service. They have lawyers with deep knowledge of energy laws that can pitch in. So I'm sure in the entire team, we have the resources. And so if you get the ball rolling with expressing what would be helpful, then we can partner with others and carry it forward.
I'd be happy to do that.
Okay. Any committee questions or comments for Mr. Zabriskie? All right. Well, thank you. So committee, we've worked through our break. I didn't want to interrupt everyone because everything was linked together. Why don't we just take a short break? So it's 10:34. I apologize I mean short. At 10:40, 6 minutes, but we reconvene and we'll pick back up with Mr.